a little meditation. Try to set motivation. So sit comfortably. If you can sit with your spine erect, place your attention on your breathing, your respiration. And it's said that once you become accustomed to this kind of meditation, in the course of just a few respirations, at most 21, you can leave yourself in a state that's devoid of the usual kind of discursive mind. Don't you try that? Before we said, could you turn that? This the last couple of times I've forgotten to mention. Turn that on. When the mind is somewhat settled, take an even subtler object as your focus. Bring your attention to your heart chakra if you can. Or just watch the mind with a corner of the mind, so to speak. Your mental consciousness withdrawing inwards, away from your senses. Remind yourself not to pay attention to the eyes or the ears, your sense of smell or taste or touch. But even within the mind itself, there are inner distractions besides the outer distractions of the senses due to karma and associations. Due to your energy currents, different thought patterns arise. Discursive thought. So as though sitting at a cafe, watching the people go by, watching the traffic, without getting up and walking after them, just note the thoughts, let them go. Try to sense the space that is left when the thoughts have gone, the space between the thoughts. It's even present as you begin to understand when the thoughts are active. You can remind yourself again and again to let go. Whatever thoughts come, don't follow them. If you notice that you've begun to follow some, recognize that as soon as possible, and again, letting go, try to sense the spaciousness of the mind within which those thoughts have been taking you on a big trip. Don't be enamored with the content. Don't be afraid of the content of your thoughts. Let it go. Just focus on something which will continue even when the thoughts, the discursive ideas are not there. That nature of your mind. Let go of the sense of your body. And within that clear, quiet state of mind, see if you can recognize the way that the self-identity, the sense of self or ego, is appearing to your mental consciousness. To help locate it, besides instigating it with some emotional episode of the past, present, that might make the ego more manifest. Also, just comparing the appearance of the I with what the Buddha explained does exist as the I, merely labeled self. Just the concept me, I. Frank or Sally or Judith, whatever. that concept is the only conventional reality. The concept of ourself is the only conventional reality that exists for ourself. Merely a name. So compare that with how the I seems to be appearing to your consciousness as something that's really there, findable, not just a name, something existing from its own side, as though it could be found if sought. And although we will, during the course, review reasonings that are used in the middle way philosophy to refute this that the Buddha gave, right now just remind yourself that the Buddha taught such a self as this that seems to be existing from its own side does not exist whatsoever. Maybe with a sense of relief, even on the level of faith. The I that is burdened with worries, with fears, with distrust or anger or strong attachment, desire. That I that instigates those strong emotions is one that seems to be existing from its own side, as though it were something inherently or truly existent. And such an I does not exist at all. The basis of all our problems does not exist at all. If we can begin to get an insight into not only the general wisdom that Buddha taught of impermanence and the law of cause and effect and so forth, but this subtle wisdom of selflessness and emptiness, we have an incredible reservoir to be able to develop good heart for others, because we know the self that we're constantly feeling sorry for, defending, confused about. That self does not exist whatsoever. And we could be devoting our attention, as the Bodhisattvas do, to working for the welfare of others, thereby bringing about our own ultimate welfare of enlightenment, eliminating all the stains from our mind, becoming truly happy, really fulfilling the definition of being a human being. Not simply acting like an animal, seeking our own welfare, accumulating resources and pleasures and defending our property and so forth. How wonderful that would be to be able to be an example for others in this, especially at this chaotic time, so much confusion and anger and aggression, danger in the world. For the purpose of developing this very special minds, these very special minds of conventional bodhicitta and the wisdom that realizes emptiness, I'm going to participate in the teaching. Listen with an open mind, beginner's mind, for the welfare of all sentient beings, so that I can achieve that state. And then bringing your attention back to the present. I'm not sure. I hope Venerable had made copies of the Heart Sutra. Do we have? Sally, do we have copies of the Heart Sutra? Venerable said she had last time. She forgot to bring to class last time. Oh, gosh. There's Venerable. Let's see. Maybe she's got them in her hands now.
She did pass out some last time.
Yeah, I didn't get. Venerable, do you have the Heart Sutra for us? You have 4 copies. I would like a copy.
Is it the same as in the prayer book?
Can I have? So, okay. So, what we're going to do at the beginning of the lessons is to recite this. First of all, this prayer that I handed out, and then the Heart Sutra itself. For those of you who are sort of like things Tibetan, this is Tibetan script. Have you seen before, Judith? Tibetan script? Okay. Some of the Tibetan class can read that. Can you believe? They can actually read that. Michelle, if you came to Tibetan class, you could read that too. If Dorji came, Dorji, can you read that? No? You could read the phonetics underneath, right? And the translation. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to recite this. This is a prayer that is said in the tradition to have been composed by Rahula, the Buddha's son, to explain the perfection of wisdom to his mother, who was what? What relation was Rahula's mother to Buddha? His wife. Thanks. Oh, you know. So Rahula was Buddha's son. I thought Buddha was an ascetic. Victoria, did Buddha have a son? What was going on?
He had a son and a wife before he gave up his royal court. The son went and searching for China.
Right. The Buddha actually had a son. Some traditions say that the son, Rahula, was actually born, and when the Buddha left, the night that the Buddha left, he actually hesitated to kiss him for fear of waking him up and the mother with whom he was. Other tradition says that he remained in the womb until Buddha achieved enlightenment. How many years did it take for Buddha to achieve enlightenment after he left home? Do you know? More than 6 years, because maybe 7 years, because he spent time with some other gurus, and then he spent 6 years in ascetic practice before he manifested attaining enlightenment. So it's a long time. The mother must have been, if that's 6 years, 7 years in the womb. So Rahula was one of the disciples of Buddha also. After he grew up, he came.
The son has to write something to help his mother understand emptiness. I mean, I'm sorry.
You would think the mother would understand it.
Yeah.
Well, he became a monk before his mom became a nun. His mother became a nun also, right? Right. Well, this is a praise. Maybe he was praising emptiness. Maybe she was a practitioner of the servant.
That whole thing in Buddhism just really bothers me.
Right.
Just,
I know.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's all right. If it bothers you, you don't have to apologize. Just try to soothe that over time. So we're going to recite this. This is often, at the very beginning, I didn't put the phonetics underneath. In the very top line, it says Yum Sher Chinma in Tibetan, although it doesn't have the phonetics underneath. That's just the title. Yum means mother. Sher Chin is an abbreviation for Sherab Ki Parul to Chimba, which means the perfection of wisdom, or the wisdom gone beyond. So it just means the mother, the wisdom gone beyond. And it's kind of like the title of this prayer. A lot of the prayers that we say, like Sangye Churang Sukhi Chognamla and so forth, many of them have a history of where they arose, who wrote them, and bodhisattvas and various saints. So this was written, supposedly composed by Rahula. And if you can follow along with me, we'll recite slowly. And then at the end, you see there's 4 lines, and then there's the mantra of the perfection of wisdom without the om. Sometimes, usually when it comes, it doesn't have the om in it. Sometimes there's om, but we just have tayata, tadyata. Tibetans say tayata, but tadyata, gate, gate, paragate, parasamgati, bodhisvaha. Do you see that at the end? So we're going to recite this in Tibetan, and then we'll recite the Heart Sutra in English. Ma sam je me sherab parul chin ma ke minga Nam ke ngoni so rang rik yeshe chul yul chen du sum galway yum la chaksel lo tadyata gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhi Thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagawan was dwelling on massive Vulture's Mountain in Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagawan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also, at that time, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara, looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element, and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly, completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared, Tadyata, Gate, Gate, Paragate, Parasamgati, Bodhi, Svaha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan rose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. So as we learn more about the Heart Sutra, we can actually meditate on the meaning of the words as we say them. As I mentioned in an earlier class, when the monks recited in the monasteries in Tibet, sometimes they recited very quickly when they needed to accumulate many quantities of recitations. Say the Tibetan government would send a request to Sarah or one of the other monasteries and say that the Heart Sutra, among others, had to be recited maybe 100,000 times or 1,000,000 times or something like that. And so the monks in the congregation in the morning prayers would recite the Heart Sutra, but they would recite it very quickly. So if there were 3,000 monks and they recited it, 30 times, what would that be? 3,000 times 30, 90, almost 100,000 there, so if they could do that in half an hour or something, if they recite it very quickly. Sometimes if you're listening, you might think, this is, I'm not interested in this, just blah, 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 blah. Sometimes they miss words, you can't hear what they're saying, you don't know where they are. But in general, when they recited very, very slowly. So slowly that they could have walked. From Sarah, my teacher said, they could walk into Lhasa. Those of you who had, you were there. So, they could walk in from Sarah, walk into Lhasa around the Barkor, the middling Korwa, and then come back to Sarah, and they would not have finished the recitation. So they were meditating on each word. So it's not always recited very quickly. When you know something, and you don't make mistake by reciting it quickly, then there's more merit to recite it quickly if you can recite it many times. Do you understand what I mean? But if it doesn't mean it, if it just makes you lungi, to recite it very, very quickly, then obviously that's not the thing to do. So later, as we go along, we'll recite more. Try to understand the meaning as we talk about. Basically, the Heart Sutra, literally, it's the Arya Bhagavati Prajna Paramita Hridaya Sutra, in small Sanskrit letters there. At the beginning of the translation in Tibetan, they always give the Tibetan translation also of that. And we mentioned last time the reason for that. Do you remember? I can't ask Michelle. She said she clutched up in 4th grade when someone asked her a question. So I can't. So is it Chris? I can't remember. Eric. Do you remember the reasons why mentioned last time why the title was translated given in Sanskrit and also translated into Tibetan, in the Tibetan? Why did they just give the Tibetan title?
I missed last class.
No,
Oh, at the end?
who remembers?
Does it have something to do with preserving the lineage? It's done in Sanskrit to preserve the lineage?
Well, first of all, to show that it's authentic, and also to leave imprint in people's minds of Sanskrit, because it said that all of the universal teachers will teach in Sanskrit. Actually, it's supposed to be the lingua, can I say the lingua franca of the god realm? It's the language of the gods, of the devas. So, maybe you'll have a head start if you get in the deva realm, you'll know how to speak. But the main reason is to leave imprint, so when you're born as a human again, maybe to meet Sanskrit and meet the teachings, but also to show, another reason is to show the kindness, remind the readers of the kindness of the translators who had translated the text from Sanskrit, because there was no way that we could understand the Buddha's teaching, say if we were Tibetan, if it was in Sanskrit. So it's also in English, like that. So that was one thing. So we began last time by talking a little bit about the text, and we're going to go back and forth. The main commentary that is the sort of like what is it called, the prescribed text for this is a commentary by Tendalarampa, which you'll find in this book, The Heart Sutra Explained. Some of you have copies slightly smaller than this. I think they're trying to save money. It must be 1% smaller pages. And on page 139, is that the same pagination? Okay, so we'll sometimes go to that text also, go back and forth. And also, there's some nice things in Donna Lopez's text. He spent some time doing this. So last time we mentioned a little bit about the title and a little bit about the meaning. It's called the Heart of the Perfection of Wisdom. It could also be translated as the essence. Hridaya in Sanskrit or Ningpo in Tibetan doesn't necessarily mean only heart. Well, heart usually is like the essence of something. Artichoke hearts, kind of like the inner essential, most important thing of the artichoke, right? You like artichoke hearts? So, the essence of the perfection of wisdom. It's also called, the title is called the Arya Bhagavati. Remember what Bhagavati meant, Doug? You remember. Bhagavan means what? That's kind of like, yeah. Remember, this is the Tibetan Chomdende and Tao transcendent destroyer, you could say, or different kinds of translations of it. It's an epithet of the Buddha, or like when we talked about Bhagawan Rajneesh, remember? Kind of means Lord. But it means the feminine version, Bhagavati, means the female, transcendent, endowed destroyer. Arya, in this case, is at the beginning of the title. If you see on this little translation that we have in small print, Arya, Bhagavati, Prajna Paramita Hridaya Sutra. Arya is something that's appended to many of the titles to indicate it's sort of the exalted sutra. So I just wanted to mention here, I thought somewhere I saw in here today, he gave some of the translation of Bhagavan. Van, we're going to talk about Bhagavan. So he's saying the other meaning, this is on page 27, the other meaning of Bhaga, emphasized in the etymology of Bhagavan, is fortune. So the Heart Sutra, Van can mean possessing. So having Bhagavan could mean someone that possesses fortune, good fortune, or, the Lord, or the exalted one. That's not the main etymology of Tibetan, but that's how it's usually in one of the famous things in Hinduism and in the Indian languages. The Heart Sutra commentator Sri Mahajana, so that's a Indian commentator. There were various Indian commentaries. He cites a verse listing the 6 fortunes with which a Buddha is endowed. So when you talk about, if you call the Buddha the Bhagawan, one thing you might be meaning is that he has complete lordship of qualities or knowledge, fame, glory, wisdom, effort. Where did I leave out one? Complete marvels of complete lordship of qualities, fame, glory, wisdom, and effort. There's only 5. Maybe complete marvel, lordship of. Okay, maybe lordship. So he sets forth the 6 fortunes in terms of the 5 wisdoms of a Buddha. He explains that lordship refers to the Buddha's abandonment of the 2 obscurations. What are the 2 obscurations? Anyone know? So, right. So we say the klesha avarana. Some of you who studied before, you remember what klesha avarana? Avarana means what? Avarana is kind of like veil or obscuration. Klesha means delusions, or Tibetan we say nyunmo. And those klesha avarana are the actual obstructions to liberation or nirvana. Then beyond that, there are subtler obscurations, even in the arhats' minds, that are called obstructions or obscurations to enlightenment. The jnana avarana, so, or shedip, the obstructions to all knowledge or to omniscience. So lordship refers to the Buddha's abandonment of the 2 obscurations, whereby he has gained mastery through destroying the 4 maras. So this is something you should know. Who are the 4? We talked about didn't we talk about the 4 maras in another course? Oma, do you remember who the?
I don't remember what they are, but I remember you mentioned them.
Do you remember? Anyone? Don, do you remember? Do you remember? Carrie, you remember? Oh. Mara Jones, Mara. No. Who are the 4? Venerable, you know back there who the 4 maras are? What the 4 maras are? What does Mara mean? Does that mean illusion? Does Mara mean illusion? It's a very common name, isn't it? kind of means demon. What's a word that means illusion? Maya. So there's a lot of ladies named Maya. Also ladies named Tara. You know anyone named Mara?
Yeah, she actually comes with some courses there.
Yeah.
Her mom's Buddhist.
Yeah. maybe that's the reason. Huh? Yeah. And maybe he has some different meaning. So, Maras, in Tibetan we say du. You know the word dutsi? Amrita. Literally it means that it's something that overcomes the Mara of death.
I found it.
Oh, you didn't?
Wheel and sharp weapons is what you talked about.
Okay.
I watched it on TV. You were on the George channel in my room. You look quite good on this. The aggregates, death, desire, and the head of outer something influences.
The head?
Like Cupid.
The head?
The head, yes, that's what you
And
said.
chief, yeah, kind of chief. That like that, yeah.
Yeah, the
Right.
Cupid Mara.
Well, that's one of them, yeah.
Hmm.
So there are.
That's what he said.
Yeah. Not all I said, but yeah, that's good. Okay. So that's not the only meaning. So there's the. Can you go again? The Mara of.
I lost the page.
Okay. Who can remember the Mara of the aggregates? Then Mara of death. That's 3. The Mara of the aggregates, the Mara of the delusions, the klesha, the Mara of death, and the Deva Putra Mara. Deva means what? That's another one of the Sanskrit words like someone's name, Deva. Deva means God, right? Putra means son. So the son of the gods. So there was one particular, I think in general there is, one particular prince of the gods, who one particular god that was very mischievous. You might say, what was that, according to Christian theology, Satan was supposed to be a fallen angel, right? Lucifer. That's different than Satan? Oh, yeah. Different than Satan. Oh, okay. I thought you were saying yes. So, maybe a little bit similar. So, because some of you might think, if there's some devil, external devils. From the Buddhist point of view, most of the maras, these demonic forces, are interior. The main one, in a sense, is the demon of the mara of our afflictions, our delusions. That's what, you might think, I'm having so much problem. There's some mara, maybe some maras, some demons or devils are afflicting me. Maybe it's your inner demons, it's your afflictions. Also your aggregates, meaning the your body and other mental factors, which themselves are susceptible to karma. They've been thrown. They're resulting from past karma in the past, so they're kind of demonic to us also, aren't they? What's the demon of death? The Mara of death? Well, that's the Lord of Death. But what does the Mara of death mean? The fact that we are. It's going to hurt, unless you're Frank Sinatra, and he did it his way. The Mara of death is the fact that we are impermanent, and that we inevitably, while we're in cyclic existence, we're under the influence of the Mara of death. Buddha's not under the influence of Mara of death. He's conquered the Mara of death because he's reached the deathless state, you might say. There's no way, even if you're, maybe someday Larry Ellison might listen to one of these, do you think? I doubt it, but anyway. Even if you're Larry Ellison, I've teased about him because he's a very, very wealthy man. He wants to have his body, was it cryogenic or cryogenically preserved, so that in the future, if medical knowledge reaches a point where you can have infinite life, they can revive him or something like that. From a Buddhist perspective, no matter what you do, when your karma finishes to be alive, no matter what you do, you hide under the Buddha's begging bowl to protect from war or something, you'll die. So anyway, you can debate about that. Maybe you might think, modern science can figure out a way to overcome this. Unless you have the karma to live longer, no matter what you do as a human, you're going to be susceptible to the Lord of Death at some point. To the demon, the Mara of death. Lord of Death means a little bit different, sort of like someone who sometimes represents the Mara of death, sometimes actually represents a sentient being who comes around and when people are dying. Maybe in the Preta realm there's someone called Yama. Anyway, so the Devaputra Mara is one of the external Maras. So that when you talk about external influences, so maybe the Cupid-like might be one of the demonic outer forces. Is not only Cupid. I might have given that example, but the son of the gods, the Devaputra Mara, was one particular being who came. He was the one that was mainly responsible to try to dissuade Buddha from achieving enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. Do you remember? Do you remember that story? No? Frank, do you know? Well, he came and brought his daughters or his girlfriends. I don't remember, his daughters, I think. And they tried to allure the Buddha. Looked very seductive and did dancing and everything, and immovable. Then they tried to frighten him, and even armies of the manifestations of the Devaputra Mara came. The Buddha was immovable, and then there's a famous episode when the Buddha, the Devaputra Mara. So this is actually an individual in the God realm, but when we talk about the Devaputra Mara, it doesn't mean only that particular Mara. It means all the demonic forces like that, external to our mind. Devaputra Mara said, who are you? It's kind of like high school, when people are kind of, who do you think you are? You're sitting there. And the Buddha said, listen, I know you achieved this state due to one particular karma. I know with my knowledge, my clairvoyance, you achieved your state as a son of the gods due to some particular virtuous deed that you did in the past. And the Devaputra Mara said, yeah, well, okay, right. Who's going to attest that you've achieved enlightenment? Huh? One of these taunting. And the Buddha, the earth-touching mudra, like in this representation, this rupa of Buddha with the right hand over the knee. It's called what's it called in Sanskrit, Sparsha. It's like a bhumi sparsha mudra. Bhumi means earth. Sparsha means touch or touching. So the Buddha touched the earth. Usually we can't, you might think that's easy to touch your finger in front of your knee, right? Is that hard to do? Can you do that? Diana, can you do that? Oma, can you do that? No. You can. Not like the Buddha did. The Buddha's elbow was actually close to his body. Our fingers aren't long enough. It said the Buddha's arms proportionally are much longer than ordinary people's arms from having given perfection of generosity in previous lifetimes. So that's his. It's not like you might think we're going to just sit in this with your hand like this. Is the Buddha's arm is next to his body, and his hands go over, and fingers touch the earth below. And when he did that, the goddess of the earth arose, who had been there for numberless eons, and she said, "I can attest to the Bodhisattva's accumulation of merit. This is how he's achieved his enlightenment." So this is sort of the story of that. So, we're talking about the word Bhagawan, right? Why the Buddha is called Bhagawan, and why this text is called the Bhagavati, the female Bhagavan, the mother, the perfection of wisdom. So this Sanskrit author had set forth 6 fortunes in terms of the 5 wisdoms of a Buddha. He explains that lordship refers to the Buddha's abandonment of the 2 obscurations, whereby he has gained mastery through destroying the 4 maras. So, destroyed the 4 maras means destroying, say, for instance, destroying the mara of death, no longer being under the influence of death. The Buddha can live as long as he wants, and so forth. He has destroyed the mara of the delusions, destroyed the mara of the aggregates. Does that mean he has no aggregates? What does that mean? What do you think? If he destroyed them, still has aggregates, doesn't he? Still has, but he has pure aggregates. So he's destroyed contaminated aggregates. That's the mara of the aggregates. When it talked about these 6 things, one was lordship, then quality. Here, the actual word is dharma. Remember, those of us who are taking Tibetan class, dharma can be translated in many ways. And in the outline of the Lanrim Chemo, remember we translated dharma as dharma teaching. Remember in the outline just recently. Here, you could translate dharma as quality. Sometimes it just means phenomena. So he translates it here as qualities. Means the Buddha's natural virtue, such as the 10 powers. There are 10 special powers that are exclusive to the Buddha. Both the first 2 fortunes are the nature of the totally pure Dharma Dhatu, corresponding to the Buddha's wisdom of the sphere of reality, which remains in eternal awareness of the nature body of a Buddha, identified as the final reality, naturally pure and free of all defilements. You notice here, Svava Vikakaya, what does that mean? The nature body of the Buddha. Who's one of our old students? Karen, you know. How many, if we talk about, Karen? If we talk about nature body as one of the bodies, how many bodies would we be presuming the Buddha has? Would you say 2 bodies, or 3 bodies, or 4 bodies? What kind of format? Because there are different ways of enumerating the so-called bodies or kayas of the Buddha. Kaya is a Sanskrit word, right? Or Tibetan ku, like we say truku or something like that. How many bodies would be pardon?
4.
4. Good. You say 3. Mm-hmm. Who's pretty good at this kind of thing? Oma? Yeah? Rupakaya and the?
Well, yeah, the
Oh, okay. We could debate. So does anyone want to debate with Sister Oma? The Rupakaya and the Dharmakaya are different, right?
I'm not sure.
Rupakaya, I was going to say, Rupakaya and Nirmanakaya are different, right?
No. Rupakaya is part of the Nirmanakaya.
Rupakaya is part of the Nirmanakaya. Okay. Let's say, look, what if we went like this? If you divided 2 bodies, you could say Rupakaya and Dharmakaya. So Rupakaya means the form body, and the Dharmakaya, essentially you could say the truth body. Dharma, or you could say the Dharma body, refers to qualities of the Buddha's mind and other things. If you divide sometimes when we talk about 3 bodies, which one do you divide first? So Tenzin was saying you divided the Dharmakaya, but the Rupakaya you divide into what? Nirmanakaya and Sambhogakaya. So we got 3. And if we divide the Dharmakaya, do you know?
The one I missed is that Sadanakaya. But that's the one I missed.
Okay, Diana will know she's going to. The jnana, like the word that we had today, yeshe, that means exalted wisdom. Dharmakaya and the Svavavikakaya. So the Dharmakaya is divided into the wisdom Dharmakaya and the nature Dharmakaya. Okay? The wisdom Dharmakaya is the Buddha's omniscient mind. That's a conventional phenomena, isn't it? The Buddha's mind. All phenomena have emptiness as their ultimate nature, but if we just talk about the Buddha's mind in general, we're talking about a conventional phenomena. Okay, the Buddha's omniscient mind. But the svavavikakaya, or the nature body, is what? Is emptiness, say for instance, the emptiness of the Buddha's own omniscient mind, right? That is called svavavikakaya. Remember when Kirti Senchab Rinpoche was here teaching Uttara Tantra? We talked about the Buddha nature. Buddha nature refers to the emptiness of our contaminated mind, right? So that Buddha nature, once we become Buddha, it becomes what? It becomes the svavavikakaya, becomes the emptiness of the Buddha's mind. Because at that point, the emptiness of our mind is the emptiness of a Buddha's mind. So the Buddha nature now becomes the svavavikakaya, in a sense. The ordinary conventional mind is the substantial cause of the wisdom Dharmakaya. Okay? And what's the substantial cause? What's the main cause? When I say substantial cause, that means kind of like what's the main continuity of cause that becomes the rupakaya, the form body. Do you know? See it? Is it like our body becomes the rupakaya? Well, that's interesting. It might be something like that. But let's say in terms of sutra. Yeah, when we talk about the substantial cause of the form body, it's the collection of merit. So that's why the bodhisattvas, if they practice the bodhisattva yana, they collect merit for 3 countless great eons. One of the reasons is to be able to manifest the Nirmanakaya and the Sambhogakaya, these 2 different bodies. So let's just finish this. Well, I have a chance to take a little break because you're probably tired. One of these qualities, fame refers to the qualities of a Buddha's form body, the cause of his fame. So the svavavikakaya we just had, now the form body. This has the nature of the mirror-like wisdom, which without conceiving of self constantly and blissfully observes all phenomena, both ultimate and conventional, exactly as they are. There's maybe more information than you need. Someone told me some story about their life recently, and they said, that's probably more than you wanted to know. Maybe you feel the same thing right now. Glory is the wisdom of equanimity, whereby the Buddha observes all sentient beings without distinction, being equally with love and compassion. Okay. And wisdom is the wisdom of individual understanding. So remember in this praise, Soso Rangrik. Do you remember, Don, in this prayer? We were asking up in our Tibetan class, Soso Rangrik. I translated individual knowledge. So here, I think this is talking about the same thing. Wisdom is the wisdom of individual understanding, the direct realization of the general and specific qualities of phenomena. And effort is earnest action, the wisdom of performing activities. Anyway. So the Tibetans don't take that as the main etymology, possessing these 6 perfections. They take Bhagavan from various sutras as meaning one who has destroyed the maras. That's when we say Tibetan chom dende, and is endowed with these qualities, but is transcendent, who has passed beyond the world, is not just an ordinary being. So why don't we take a little break, and if you have questions, I know some of you are keeping a list of questions, and then right after the break we can have a little time for a question, and then we'll continue on. So, does anyone have anything that they would like to ask questions about. Tenzin has a question.
Usually does.
That's good.
There's no data?
It's a good sign.
A lot of this stuff seems like mythology to me. Buddhism, I thought, was supposed to be logical. Perhaps I'm wrong. That the goddess springing out of the earth and saying, of course he's enlightened. Seems like mythology to me.
Oh, mythology. I thought you said apology.
No, mythology. Not apology. It's the mustache. And that really kind of stumbles me up often. That a lot of this stuff seems like mythology, gods, bodhisattvas hovering in the air. So, where's the logic?
So that's, what's the contradiction?
What's the contradiction?
There's no contradiction between these things that we might think, that we might find now
difficult to accept, and logic. We might think that like Jesus walking on the water, raising the dead, or something like that. Actually, from a Buddhist perspective, those are completely possible. Those kind of powers. Many of the, as you begin to practice, all we have to go on is our 21st century. Is this 21st century? 21st century experience and logic and science, and we have a lot of confidence in that, or we think we do. But the realm of existence, the things that can exist that we're unaware of, are immense. I mean, that's one of the things that maybe interests a lot of people in the spiritual path, that there's something beyond the tangible and obvious. The spiritual, these kinds of things that can happen, clairvoyance, for instance, that's something that a lot of people don't have a lot of problem with. They can imagine that when the mind is incredibly focused, it can know other people's thoughts and can know events that, the karmic tendency, what will happen in the future and so forth, even to a very great length of time in the future. But one of the things that I've in my own, I'm hesitant to call practice, but my own experience of Buddhism over the years, is that there have been a lot of things that might seem like stumbling blocks, some kind of thing that comes up and you think, well, I can't, I can't accept that, so, I don't know what the mind is. So what, so maybe throw the whole thing out, But I think what you have to, much more skillful way of thinking is kind of like as a smorgasbord. If there's a huge, delicious smorgasbord in front of you, some of which you've begun to taste, and you say, whoa, green tea and broccoli. Wow. This is an allusion to something Venerable said in the tea break. A great tea with, or cream cheesecake. And then suddenly, green tea and broccoli. Oh, I'm not going to eat this smorgasbord because there's green tea and broccoli. Well, that would be, to use this example, just this example, that would be, we think, well, you're being kind of short-sighted. There's all sorts of great stuff here, healthy, makes you happy, and very, very useful, healthy for you. There might be some things that because of your own biochemistry right now that don't taste good, so leave it. You don't have to swallow everything. The Buddha did not say that you had to accept everything he said on the basis of faith. In fact, he said exactly the opposite. You shouldn't accept what I say out of faith alone. Didn't mean you shouldn't have faith. But you should check what I say in the same way that you check something valuable. In the case of the Buddha, gave example of gold and so forth. Sometimes different things, leaving something that may seem problematic, like say Mount Meru. Where's Mount Meru? I don't see any Mount Meru. Where the gods are living on top of Mount Meru. One side is turquoise, one side is, oh, come on. So maybe one leaves this for some time, and maybe later one comes back to it and understands it on some level, maybe on some psychic level. There is some kind of structure upon which the gods reside. Maybe not. It's not really essential. Some things are not really essential. Other things are essential to the Buddhist path. Say bodhicitta, compassion and so forth. For some of us, maybe it's difficult to think about compassion. I might have mentioned a friend of mine in India who's a great Hindu scholar. And he asked me to teach him about meditation. And sometimes when we would meditate on compassion, afterwards, he'd kind of look a little bit, what would you say, bummed out. I said, what's wrong? And he had said, well, I'd rather, I don't want to meditate on compassion. Now, I'd rather think that at the time of death, I decide then whether I want to stick around or go for nirvana, From a Buddhist perspective, that's very limited. Limiting also. Because if you don't train in these various thoughts, the mind is never going to transform into that. So I think there's some things, like some people have problem with reincarnation, for instance, not only psychic powers or earth goddess or, walking on water or flying, the bodhisattvas hovering in the air or something, or when the Buddha teaches, the other universes, other Buddha realms shake, and the bodhisattvas there with the Buddha in that realm say, well, what's going on? And the Buddha says, in the Saha universe, Shakyamuni Buddha is turning the wheel of Dharma at Rajagriha. And they, with their psychic powers, they come. You might say, yeah, right. What's a more pejorative word than myth? Fairy tale. This is just, someone might think. But it's maybe it's worth keeping an open mind. There might be some things that are, what is it called? If I'm pronouncing it right, hagiography? Is that the right word? Hagiography? When you talk about the biography of some person in which all of the events are made much more exalted and sort of like everything was perfect, and sort of like the spiritual biographies of the lamas. You might think, well, no one could be that perfect, Whereas in some cases, maybe these are actually things that have happened. Other cases, there may be things that are exaggerated, but it doesn't matter. It's better not to throw out the smorgasbord, rather than saying throw out the baby with the bathwater. Better not to throw out the whole smorgasbord because of the olives or the broccoli green tea. There's so many delicious things there, that make sense. Compassion, bodhicitta, wisdom, impermanence, patience, how our lives, when we recognize it is possible to be patient, it is possible to control the mind. When you start to practice this way and you see some transformation of your mind, then you take those Dharma jewels, those little slivers of Dharma realization, and even though that's not the whole Dharma jewel, that's leading you there. It can lead you there. So you take that and shrine that in your mind and take refuge in that at least. And even if that's all there was, and of course there's much more, when you come to think of it about in our lives, that's so, understanding impermanence, understanding patience, understanding kindness and forgiveness. Incredible value. The parts of the smorgasbord that you have tasted and that you are capable of understanding now. Other parts, maybe leave. Maybe for some people, reincarnation is no problem. For other people, big stumbling block. They might think, no, I have to give up Buddhism. I don't believe in reincarnation. Oh, I don't believe in karma. It's just luck. Someone might think, But other things make sense. So it's better to just leave for some time and come back to them later when the mind is has had some experience from practicing that which you do find tasty. It's my suggestion. It's my experience. Okay. So, someone else have? Venerable.
I was reading that the Buddha, a sutra can happen through someone being blessed, through receiving a blessing through the Buddha. So that happens through the wisdom mind of the Buddha, that this person receives a blessing, and that can become a sutra if they speak those words. That's what.
Are you saying that, or are you asking?
That's what I was reading. No, that's what I was reading in here. And so, what my question was is, at this, even though the Buddha's not alive on earth now, can a sutra still happen if someone receives a direct blessing from the Buddha?
Well, the Nirmanakaya, Supreme Nirmanakaya
Form doesn't appear on earth. Doesn't mean the Nirmanakaya doesn't appear on earth. Can appear to people in meditation. Also, Sambhogakaya appears in the pure realms, and people can have received teachings. Some people can receive teachings from statues, seeing the statue as Nirmanakaya form. But I think when you talk about sutra, sutra has different meanings. Sutra can just mean discourse, but if you talk about a new sutra, who wouldn't say that new sutras, say some lama came or someone claimed to be Buddha or someone, we wouldn't usually call that a sutra. However, in the collection of the sutras, in the Tibetan canon, Mahayana canon, also probably in the Chinese, I'm not absolutely certain, maybe someone can check, but the texts of, the 5 texts of Maitreya that were taught to a Sangha are also in the Mahayana Sutra Pitaka, in the Kangyur, the translation of the Buddha's teaching. So that's considered also a sutra because Maitreya, although he's not the universal teacher now, he is Buddha. Other teachings by lamas you wouldn't usually call sutra. Say, for instance, even if you had a lot of confidence that Dalai Lama was Buddha, or your own guru was Buddha, or Karmapa, or whoever, Jesun Kushla, who's Kunding, was Buddha. You wouldn't call that sutra. Still, it can be very important advice, So.
Gelugpas reject termas, these treasure teachings on that basis?
Gelugpas, it sounds like some kind of tortoise in the Galapagos Islands or something. The Gelugpa tradition, yeah, there are lamas that accept termas. You know what termas are? Do you know, Georgie? Can you explain what a terma is? I believe. Come on, I want you to turn around there.
We have to get at least once a course.
There I am in the mirror. Okay.
Oh, no, we want the full.
Oh, it's too close.
No, that's good. That's good. Yeah. Okay. Good.
Make up.
I believe I read somewhere that when Guru Rinpoche Padmasambhava was in Tibet, he gave many teachings for the future that would be most skillful to be used in future times. And he gave them to many of his 25 main disciples. And after he gave the teaching, he asked one of the disciples, usually I think it was Yeshe Sogyal, but to hide it somewhere, to be put somewhere and kept away until the future time when it was most beneficial. And they're sometimes hidden in the water or in rocks or in someone's mind or in space. These termas, they're called treasure teaching, the treasures, hidden treasures. And so the tertans are beings who reveal the treasures.
So terma,
Terma,
treasure, trunpa, means to reveal or to teach. So those who reveal or show the treasures. I'd say that for the Tibetan class, because they studying the word tomba, like founder, teacher, revealer.
And then, oh yeah, I think sometimes there's something about it's often revealed in a script they call sometimes Dakini script, which is it's not a language they teach, I don't think, and it's kind of indecipherable code, and then these Turtons are able to read it. That's what I've read somewhere.
Okay,
I'm not
thank
sure. You can
for
probably
Thank you
elaborate.
for the background. That's good.
So termas basically, in the Tibetan tradition, are teachings that were hidden, not necessarily by Padmasambhava, but many of them. In the Nyingma tradition, there's a lot of revelation of termas that were hidden, as though there were teachings that were not, people weren't ready for at that time. Gelugpa in general doesn't have any problem with that. They don't accept all of the doctrinal position, sort of the tenets, the way that the Nyingma understands things. But as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, all of the Tibetan traditions have the final understanding of emptiness the same, and they're all getting to the same goal through different means. So I think there are Tibetan lamas of the Gelugpa tradition who have no problem with termas. For instance, in one point of view, you might say that the Prajnaparamita Sutra of 100,000 verses was a terma, in a sense, because it was kept by the Nagas. This is one for Tenzin. The Nagas kept the Prajnaparamita Sutra after the Buddha passed away in under the earth in Nagaland for many hundreds of years, until Nagarjuna actually went there and brought it back. So yeah, that's kind of a terma also. So there's other kinds of examples like that, but they don't hold all of those termas as their main practice the same way, or as a major practice as in the Nyingma tradition. But I don't think there's a big contradiction. But I was hoping there'd be questions about the Heart Sutra rather than termas. And you don't have any questions about the Heart Sutra? Oh, it's pretty clear? Okay. I'm going to hold you to that when examination time comes. Okay, so let's go a little bit further. So at the beginning of the text, it says, "Thus did I hear at one time." When I was looking here today, I found the famous, here it is, "Eva Maya Shrutam Ekasmin Samaye," on page 33, near the bottom. This is what it is in Sanskrit. All of the sutras begin with that statement. Evam means thus, like also comes in vam or bam from other kinds of teachings. Maya Shrutam Ekasmin Samaye. So this was prescribed by the Buddha himself to the monks, that when they recited the sutras, that they should say this. And he didn't say this only to Ananda. When they recited the sutras, they should say this. So it didn't necessarily mean that they had actually been there and heard it. It could be, but there were many sutras that Ananda was not present for before he became a monk, and other things that he heard from others. But this was an indication that what was being recited was authentic, and it was heard either by oneself or from one of the other disciples of the Buddha who heard it directly from the Buddha. It's kind of in the lineage, like when we were talking about scripture and realization. We were talking about that in the Lanrim last time. Scriptural understanding, and so one of the things to uphold the scriptural understanding meant to receive the oral transmissions of the text that went back to the Buddha. So in a sense, this is a kind of an indication that there's an authentic lineage of that also, because you either heard it directly from the Buddha or you heard it from someone who heard it from the Buddha. This was in the time of the Buddha. Maybe there'd be even a third hand. Maybe you heard it from your teacher who heard it from his teacher who heard it from the Buddha or something. Maybe, but it wouldn't be much more removed from that. Later, of course, it was more removed. So the sutra begins with that. Thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagawan was dwelling on massive vultures mountain in Rajagriha. So we talked about this last time, right? A little bit. If you look in Tendala Rampa's commentary, he mentions about why it's called Vulture's Peak. This is on page 141. Why is it called Vulture's Peak? It's obvious that there are many ways of explaining this. Well, it's obvious because there's a lot of different explanations. That's what he means by it's obvious. Some say that it's called Massive Vulture's Peak or mountain because the mountain is shaped like a vulture. I didn't notice that myself. Maybe it's changed over time. I've had a chance to visit it. If you have a chance to visit, we could say in brief, Vulture's Peak or Massive Vulture's Peak, very, very powerful. The top region where supposedly the Buddha taught is quite small, but it's very, very, very kind of out in the wilderness in a sense. I mean, it's not that far from the city, but it's it's not built up a lot. You might have some kind of strong desire to meditate on the Heart Sutra there, or on some other, on wisdom. There's a incredibly, for me, incredibly inspiring photograph of His Holiness when he was much younger on Vulture's Peak, meditating. I don't know if any of you have seen, looking very, very, like he's really, and very striving very hard. I remember when I visited Vulture's Peak, probably the first time with some of my Dharma friends. There was Anila Heli and what's his name, Harry, and a couple of other people. And I remember when I was either walking up or walking down, I twisted my ankle really bad. I fell down. I was like, oh! And Harry came up to me, dear Harry, and said, "Wow, fantastic!" So it's interesting to watch one's mind. You might, if you're a very negative person like myself, you have to train for some time to overcome, to see that this is actually something very beneficial, because you're in this very holy place on pilgrimage. Any kind of hardship that you undergo is actually a sign of purification. Actually, is a very great purification. So. But those are the kind of things that can happen if you visit a place like that. It's also called, there are other reasons why it's called that, Massive Vulture's Mountain. He gives another reason. It's shaped like a pile of vultures. One is that the mountain is shaped like a vulture, then it's shaped like a pile of vultures. It was given the name because vultures protect the mountain where many vultures ate corpses. It is called a pile, because the word pungbo is in there in Tibetan, due to the brilliance of the birds who are beings who understand emptiness. And when the subduer was 58, who's the subduer? The Buddha is another epithet. When the subduer was 58 years old, in the fire snake year, he went to that mountain which was shaped like a vulture's head. A demon who had magically changed himself into a vulture took the teacher's robe and dropped it on the mountain, where it turned to stone in 4 layers and is known as the Great Vulture Pile. Because that mountain is the place where the Buddhas teach the perfection of wisdom, it is like the Vajra seat. We say Dorje Den in Tibetan, which is another way of saying Bodh Gaya. It cannot be destroyed by hardness or fire and is immovable. Therefore, it is explained that although other mountains do not impede beings of the intermediate state, this one does. You know, in the Bardo state, supposedly you have a body that's unimpeded by other tactile objects. You can go through mountains, but you can't go through Vulture's Peak. So be careful. Dorje, when you're traveling on, be careful. Don't knock your head. Also, generally, in general, it says that this is for Tenzin's sake, because he's asking about these amazing stories of bodhisattvas flying. It's sometimes called Massive Vulture's Peak because when the Buddha was teaching the Prajnaparamita sutras there, many bodhisattvas congregated, but there was not enough room on the peak, and so they had to be in the space around. So it doesn't mean that the name, you might say, well, look at, the name may have predated the Buddha, so all of these stories that have to do with the Buddha's presence are myth or baloney because the name predated that anyway, so how could the name have come from the time of the Buddha? But all the Buddhas teach the Prajnaparamita on Vulture's Peak, and there were 3 Buddhas, at least in these 1,000, in this fortunate eon, 3 Buddhas that came before the Buddha, so there were others who taught it, so there may be some kind of heritage of that in language and in karmic instincts and everything. Also, there's a lot of debate about when it was taught. When it says, "Thus did I hear at one time the Buddha was dwelling at Massive Vulture's Mountain in Rajagriha." Rajagriha, remember, means the city of the king, the royal city. This is north of Bodh Gaya in Bihar province, which is not a place you'd want to travel for a long time, other than for religious reasons. Together with a great sangha of monks and a great sangha of bodhisattvas. I say sangha here, translated community, just for ease. So when was that? When did the Buddha teach the Prajnaparamita Sutra? Did he teach it before he taught the Four Noble Truths? Or after, or way after, or when he died? So there are different ideas about that. Whether that's really important or not, sometimes it might be worth investigating. Here he says the scholars of astrology, known as the 3 oceans, there's 3 Tibetan astrologers. I assume they're Tibetan. They may have been Sanskrit and Tibetanized name, but I think they're Tibetan. Asserted that the Buddha taught the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras on the full moon day of the 3rd lunar month and entered into nirvana on the 15th day of the next month. So that would mean he taught it near the end of his life, right? A month before he died. But that's not everyone's opinion. Jamyang Shepa, you know who Jamyang Shepa was? Great Tibetan Lama who wrote this great treatise on tenets that you fellows had when His Holiness taught in New York, Don, you had the abbreviated commentary to Jamyang Shepa's root verses. He was a great scholar at, Ganden, I guess, right? Is it Ganden? No, Drebo. Ganden. I can't remember. Anyway, Jamyang Shepa means he upon who Manjushri smiled. Jamyang means Manjushri, Manjugosha. Shepa means smiled. So it's kind of, he was someone of great wisdom. So he refutes this, he refutes the 13th century scholars Chim, the translator Chok, and others in his analysis of the Perfection of Wisdom. Chim Jambayang was one of these great commentators who wrote commentaries to the Abhidharma Kosha. I don't know who the translator Chok and others refers to. In his system, in the system of Jamyang Shepa, he asserts that the teacher, that means the Buddha, set forth the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras the year after he achieved Buddhahood. So that's a lot different, right? These other astrologers said it was near the end of the Buddha's life. Jamyang Shepa said the year after he achieved Buddhahood. So that was, how old was he then? He left home when he was 29, so he achieved enlightenment when he was about 36, right? Because he had spent 6 years in ascetic practice, and he spent some time studying with some teachers before that. So a year after that, when he was 37. Anyone here 37? Who's 37? Venerable? You're younger? Younger. Are you 37? Younger. I was just trying to find someone who might be ready to teach. You're younger than 30, much younger than 30. You're younger than 30. I know you're younger than 30. Sorry. Some people, however, doubt that the Buddha taught it a year after he achieved Buddhahood. When the teacher achieved enlightenment on the 15th day of the 4th lunar month, is that in doubt? That's called what? 15th day of the 4th lunar month. Is that just something like, you never heard of that before? 4th lunar month is called what? Sakadawa, the month of the Saka. What do they call it in Pali and Sanskrit? Vaisakha. In Sanskrit it's Vaisakha. In the West, in Pali, they kind of say Vesak, right? Have you heard of Vesak? Yeah, Wesak. Sometimes they say Wesak, W, but it's Vaisakha. In Sanskrit it's Vaisakha. That refers to the 4th month. It was on the full moon of the 4th month when Buddha achieved enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. And so that whole month is karmically powerful. From the very beginning to the end, all of the karmic deeds one does during that month are multiplied in their efficacy. So when it says when the teacher achieved enlightenment on the 15th day of the 4th lunar month, that means the day that traditionally when, it's full moon, 15th day means the full moon, right? Of that lunar month, a son was born to Amritodana, and that was Ananda. So Amritodana, I think, was the Buddha's the Buddha's mother's brother, who was a king of another, king of another kingdom just over the river from Kapilavastu, where the Buddha was born. And the people of that kingdom had a very close historical connection with the Shakyas, with the Shakya clan. And in fact, the Buddha's wife came from that clan also. So Ananda supposedly was, one stream of thought has it that he was born when the Buddha achieved enlightenment. So he'd be like 36, 7 years younger than the Buddha, right? At that time, when he set forth the perfection of wisdom in the 3rd lunar month, at the time when he had set forth the perfection of wisdom in the 3rd lunar month, 12 months after achieving Buddhahood, so the 4th lunar month a year later, so 1 month before that, so essentially 11 months after he achieved enlightenment, when he was teaching the perfection of wisdom, it has been just slightly more than 10 months since Ananda was born. How then could Ananda have been in the audience when the perfection of wisdom was spoken? Well, there's no big problem there, because he could have heard it from others, right? To that, Jamyang Shepa responds that there's no fault, because Ananda was not in the audience when the perfection of wisdom's sutras were initially spoken, but he was present when they were spoken later, right? And also he heard them. There are also doubts about this. So the prologue to the 8,000 verse Prajnaparamita, that's what that Sanskrit name means, the prologue says, "Thus did I hear at one time, the transcendent victor," this is how this author translates Bhagawan. Okay? The Bhagawan was staying at Vulture Peak in Rajagriha together with a great assembly of monks, 1,250 monks. They were all arhats who had exhausted the contaminants, in control, and there's some words skipped, in control of all minds, and had achieved the excellent perfection of the excellent perfection, with the exception of one person. And this was the Venerable Ananda. I was going to say Dorji, but I was just, you thought, I knew you knew that I was going to be saying that. So, you know, the story goes that when the Buddha passed away, not only at this point when the Buddha taught the perfection of wisdom, but when the Buddha passed away and there was a council to recite the Buddha's, to review, to revise the Buddha's teachings. Everyone would listen to a re-recitation of all the Buddha's teachings. That Ananda had not achieved arhatship at that time. You know that, right? When did he achieve arhatship? Did he ever achieve arhatship?
They all had to achieve arhatship, right?
To be in the assembly,
Yeah.
I think Kashapya, it made the rule that only the arhats could be there. It's kind of like, you know, some big assembly where you have to have some kind of understanding. And he wasn't being mean or something, but he realized that up to now, Ananda had it easy and hadn't really applied himself to the final effort that was necessary to achieve single point of concentration and meditation on selflessness. So they found a bunch of faults with Ananda. I can't remember if what were the 9 things that he did wrong? Anyone? Do you know them? Some terrible things, like he'd taken the side of the. This would be good for the feminists. He took the side of the Buddha's stepmother and wife and the others, and sort of convinced the Buddha to let the women become nuns, and he'd done all sorts of and other unspeakable things, big mistakes. He although prompted by the Buddha that the Tathagata, the Bhagawans, can remain, if they wish, can remain forever in human form. It sort of went over his head. This was a couple of months before the Buddha passed away, and Ananda didn't request at that point the Buddha, "Oh, Buddha, please remain." And so the Buddha passed away. And so this was another fault. You know, there were the other faults that he. Anyway, you can check in various kinds of texts where. So they found fault with it, and he hadn't achieved arhatship, so he had to stay outside. And so then he applied himself, and in the short period of time before the congregation began, he achieved arhatship, and he was able to attend. And he was the one, according to the Pali Canon, that recited from memory all of the sutras. He was the foremost of the Buddha's disciples in memory, I guess. So many of the disciples were foremost in different things. Like, was it Shariputra was foremost in what? Do you remember? Wisdom, right? Because he's the interrogator of Avalokiteshvara here. Maha Modgalyana was foremost, we mentioned last time, in what? Psychic powers. He was the one that was able to do these amazing things. And I think Kashyapya, if I'm not mistaken, was foremost. Do you know Venerable? What he was? Was foremost in ascetic practices. He's the one, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Kashyapya, he's the one that the Buddha gave his robe to. You know, when the Buddha first settled on the middle way, when he had not yet manifested under the Bodhi tree enlightenment, he spent 6 years in ascetic practice, and at a certain point he was completely naked. He didn't have, 6 years, he didn't have clothes, and he actually went to a cemetery, a charnel ground, and got the what's it called? You wrap a corpse in shroud. The shroud of the servant of a village. Servant's shroud has got to be pretty poor material because you don't usually use good material for a shroud. So the servant's shroud, he used that to make his first robe. It was like itchy and rough, and it was that he passed on to Kashapya later, and he gave of these, what are the 13 ascetic practices that the monks, some monks that find affection, sort of find special liking for that, they can take these 13 extra practices. And so he was the foremost in ascetic practice, but I think Ananda was the foremost in memory. So many of the arhats had something that the Buddha had proclaimed, had prophesized about them, stated about them. So anyway, it said in this 8,000 verse Prajnaparamita, it said that Ananda had not achieved arhatship. So what? What's the problem? So he's saying, the Tendal Larampa says, if this prologue is the prologue from the time when the 8,000 verse Prajnaparamita was initially spoken, then it contradicts Jamyang Shepa's assertion that Ananda was absent. Oh, this is what he's talking about, right? Because Jamyang Shepa is saying that Ananda was not yet born, right, at this time, or he was just a baby. If this is the prologue from the time when the word of the Buddha was compiled, so this means when you say, thus did I hear at one time, maybe this is referring, in some cases when it says there are 1,200 monks, maybe that refers to the time of the first, what's the word they usually use? Convention? Convocation? What do they say then? The first council, when these are being revised. It can mean that that's when it was heard. So if that's the case, if it was the case that that's what's being referred to and Ananda's there, it contradicts the fact that Ananda was an arhat at the time, because it says that he was not an arhat. If this is a prologue from something in between, it seems to contradict the Buddha's instruction to Ananda in a text called the Dharma Samgiti to use these words, thus did I hear at one time, when compiling his words. Monks collect the doctrine, adding, thus did I hear at one time. Anyway, so you can read this. This is something for, there are other things that we will spend more time analyzing. Just to sort of introduce a couple of topics, there's a lot of kinds of doubts and worries. It's not as though the Tibetans and all of the Buddhists just accept some kind of mystical thing. They do analyze these things with as much logic as they can, and that's considered to be very valid and very important. So, the sutra begins, thus did I hear at one time, the Bhagavan was dwelling on massive Vulture's Mountain, Vulture's Peak, in Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. So, when it says a great community of monks, that infers that they're hearers, and Shravakas doesn't mean that they're Mahayana monks, because otherwise you'd call them the great Sangha of bodhisattvas. So there were some, in the Mahayana Sutras, it's not only the bodhisattvas who are present, there are also some Hinayana practitioners, whereas in the setting of the Pali Canon, in the Hinayana Sutras, it never mentions that there were bodhisattvas present. Okay, maybe those bodhisattvas had psychic powers and they were listening, because the bodhisattvas definitely listened to the Buddha's teachings, even the Hinayana Sutras. It's not as though that's kid stuff. They definitely listened, but maybe there was reason for them to do so with their psychic powers. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. So this line is translated different ways in different translations. So this is in this situation when the Buddhist the Heart Sutra is taking place, the Bhagavan, the Buddha, was absorbed in the meditative concentration. This means that what we call samadhi. There are different kinds of samadhis. Remember we studied in Mind and Mental Factors, samadhi is something we have no chance having right now? What do you think, Tony? No chance you can have samadhi? No, I mean, I'm just asking, is this something like some super high thing only yogis or, great meditators have? Who studied Mind and Mental Factors? Judith, did you study Mind and
We do have kinds of samadhi, but not qualified samadhi.
Right, because samadhi is one of the 51 mental factors. It's in the group that are called the five object ascertaining factors. So every fully qualified consciousness has a certain amount of concentration to stay on the object for some period of time, whatever its object might be. But when we talk about meditative samadhi, fully qualified samadhi, that's something that's only developed for the first time when you develop what we call shamatha. I think in Pali tradition where they say samatha, right? Shamatha, or tranquil abiding, calm abiding. How do we say it in Tibetan? Anyone know? Shine. Remember Rinpoche was teaching about shine. So that, the achievement of shine, tranquil abiding, calm abiding, that is the first fully qualified samadhi. But after that, there are many kinds of samadhis, meditative concentrations, that the arhats and the bodhisattvas in particular developed for various reasons. They had various names, like the samadhi, like lion, and this particular samadhi that the Buddha was absorbed in, called profound perception. Sometimes it's called, people translate it as profound illumination. I think it's Nangwa Sabmo Shejowa Tingne Zenla Nyomba Shukso. But it's, the word Nangwa in Tibetan can mean perception or can mean illumination. It seems like it's from the commentaries, some of the commentaries, that what it's talking about is profound perception, meaning that it's a concentration in which the Buddha was both aware of the conventional and ultimate natures at the same time, that kind of samadhi. Ooh, it also, where it says the categories of phenomena, there's a term, Chukki Namdang. You were asking me about that, weren't you? About who was asking me about it? I can't remember the Sanskrit name, the word for that, but a very common paryaya, I think, dharma paryaya. Sometimes it means the synonyms of phenomena, but literally it means the categories of phenomena. So the Buddha himself is in meditative concentration. He's not talking. He's like meditating. And this scene that's going on around him does not disturb his concentration. In fact, the whole event is called a sutra, as someone was asking. I think, were you asking, Thea, about the meaning of sutra? Who was asking earlier? Angie. I'm sorry. For something to be called a sutra, it doesn't have to be only delivered by the Buddha himself. It can be inspired by the Buddha's presence. You said something about blessed by his mind. Can be. Well, for instance, the Buddha's there and knows what's going to happen, and there's a certain blessing there, and under that circumstance, if the Buddha accedes to that, some of those events are also called sutras. There's some events that took place when the Buddha was either in concentration or not speaking and so forth that are still called sutra, do the blessing. So this is what is a case in the Heart Sutra. The Buddha only speaks at the end when he arises from that concentration. He still knew what was said, right? It wasn't like he was like, you know, what happens, you know. He still knew. He said, well said, well said. Do you know how they say that in, we talked about this once before. They still do in the Theravada countries. Do you remember, Venerable, at the end of the lectures in Malaysia and other things, what do the Theravadans usually say to the speaker? Yeah, sadhu, sadhu. Excellent, excellent, or well said, well said. So, the Bhagawan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also, so at that same time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara, looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates, or the five aggregates, you can also say, also as empty of inherent nature. Now we're getting into some sort of the meat of the sutra. Let's go through this slowly. We have a long name here, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara. That was a tongue twister, right? Isn't it? Avalokiteshvara, you remember, is what Tibetans call Chenrezig, right? And Chenrezig is one of the 8 great Bodhisattva disciples of Shakyamuni Buddha. Do you remember, Venerable, what the 8 are? I think in 2 or 3 of our courses we went, who can remember, who are the 8?
Srutigarbha, Vajrapani, Akashagarbha, Avalokiteshvara,
He's jumping all over.
Manjushri, Sarvanivarana, Vishkambini, Samantabhadra, and Maitreya.
Yeah, I don't know how you just jumped. So I kind of think of it as like when we talk about in the Tankas, when you talk about the 3 qualities of Buddha, Avalokiteshvara, Manjushri, Vajrapani, then Maitreya, then, I mean, you could do it in ways, then what? Skidigarbha, Akashagarbha. You didn't say Akashagarbha, did you? Did you say Akashagarbha? I should put Samantabhadra earlier. So Avalokiteshvara, Manjushri, Vajrapani, Maitreya, Samantabhadra. Those are ones that are quite common, right? Then Skidigarbha, Akashagarbha, and Sarva Nivarana Vishkambini. The boy who had that long name in the schoolyard that everyone teased him about. So those are called the 8 great bodhisattvas. They're said to be disciples of the Buddha. They may have all been Buddhas. Certainly there's debate about, when you study the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras in the monasteries, about Maitreya at that time. We call him the Bodhisattva Maitreya. So it's still of the same mind stream, maybe manifestation of the mind stream of the Maitreya who's in Tushita heaven, because when the Buddha came to earth, it's not like a different person just called Maitreya. It's actually Maitreya manifesting at that time. So it's actually a Buddha, but manifesting as a Bodhisattva. So we call the Bodhisattva Maitreya. We don't call him the Buddha Maitreya. Here, Avalokiteshvara is called Arya Avalokiteshvara. Because, what does that infer? That he's an Arya being, that he's realized emptiness directly, he's on the path of seeing. He's an Arya being, right? So he's someone who can expound, not only as a Bodhisattva, he can expound about the real meaning of emptiness, not just beginner. He's called a Bodhisattva. You know what the word Bodhisattva means. Why is he called a Mahasattva? A great being. Maha means great, right? Sattva means courageous being or being. So what's the reason? There's a nice explanation in one of the commentaries. You you can, as you read through, if you have this text, the gist of it is that there's no difference between. It's not as though there's someone who's a bodhisattva and there's another one who's a bodhisattva mahasattva, like something, like getting your Eagle Scout badge or something. Someone who's a Boy Scout, but someone who's an Eagle Boy Scout or something like that. It's not like that. It's just emphasizing from a different point of view. From one point of view, a bodhisattva is someone who is aiming for what? Bodhi, right? Enlightenment. Bodhisattva, great courageous person aiming for enlightenment. But what's the meaning of bodhicitta? Kind of the definition. There's two important factors.
Enlightenment for yourself and others.
It's like there's a very famous verse in the Abhisamayalankara by Maitreya that gives a definition of what we call mind generation, semke, this word we were talking about in class, which is means conventional. We say conventional mind generation means bodhicitta. So it means semke pani shendon chir yangdak zokbe jangchub de. So it means bodhicitta, or mind generation, is the aspiration for complete enlightenment for the welfare of others. So it has to be motivated out of compassion and desire that others be freed from suffering. It's not just bodhicitta is not just wishing to attain enlightenment, but the word bodhisattva kind of emphasizes that part. Whereas mahasattva means a person who has a great view, is mainly emphasizing the other aspect of for the welfare of others. So you could read, there's more commentary about it, but you can read in, I think in some, maybe not in Tenda La Rampas, but in some other places, near the beginning when it's talking about the first time Bodhisattva, Mahasattva comes up. So let's end here, and let's do a little dedication. Often at the end of teachings, there are many dedication prayers. And if you know the essence of dedication, then they'll make much more sense to you, because they're generally they're talking about conventional dedication, ordinary dedication, so that the merit is not wasted or consumed in one event in the future, but dedicated to some event such as our own enlightenment or the enlightenment of all sentient beings. And until that event takes place, the karma will never be exhausted. So let's try to dedicate the merit to the development of the two bodhicittas, the conventional mind generation, the wish to attain enlightenment for the welfare of sentient beings, and the ultimate bodhicitta, the wisdom that realizes emptiness, that is within the continuum of a person who has conventional bodhicitta. May these two minds be developed due to these merits that we've created tonight, that we've created in the past, that we will create. May these two minds arise in the continua of all sentient beings. May our enemies develop good heart and wisdom and overcome, purify their negative karma. May our loved ones, all sentient beings who have been our mother, achieve enlightenment through developing these two minds due to the merit that we've created tonight. Let's dedicate and sort of decide, aspire that the merit ripen in that way. And then seal the dedication in the emptiness of the three spheres. The merits being dedicated are empty of true existence, can't be found anywhere, although conceptually at first it seems like you created some merits. You know that they function, but you can't really find them. They're not inherently existent the way that they appear to the mind. Nor the goal, the development of the two bodhicittas in the minds of all sentient beings so that they achieve enlightenment. That state is one which is merely labeled by mind, doesn't exist, can't be found anywhere from its own side. Also the dedication itself, including the dedicator, yourself, merely labeled. And a collection of parts that appear to the contaminated mind, but have no inherent existence, as they seem to appear. Empty, but still functioning.